All right, hello everyone, and welcome to the art demonstration tutorial for this week. This week we're going to do something slightly different. For the past few weeks since we started remote teaching, everything that we've been asking you to do has been all about observing things around you with your eyes and translating those things into paintings and drawings. And yes, we've asked you to think about changing the colours of the things that you see in front of you, and maybe even slightly simplifying or altering the shapes of things that you see. But all in all, it's all been about looking with your eyes and making paintings of things that you experience with your eyes. And you've been influenced a little bit by Van Gogh, a bit by Matisse, but the starting point has always been looking. Well, in today's lesson, what we're going to do is switch that around a little bit. We're not going to be using the sense of sight as our primary method of being inspired. We're actually going to think about listening. So today's lesson is all about listening to sound and music, actually, specifically music, and thinking about ways in which we can translate our experience of listening to music into images. Okay, so into visual things. The artist that we're going to use as inspiration for our work today is somebody that you may have come across before. This is a painting by a Russian painter called Vasily Kandinsky. And this is a painting that he made in 1914. So over 100 years ago, Kandinsky was making paintings like this. Incredible influence Kandinsky had on art and painting. He was one of the first artists to paint in a style which was completely abstract, so a style which did not seem to be trying to depict the world around him that he saw with his eyes. Kandinsky was interested in depicting a different kind of reality, okay, something that was based on sense and emotion in a way that was completely free from trying to look like anything recognizable. So these things were completely abstract. Quite beautiful for it. And in Kandinsky, what you see is a whole range of different marks. Okay, so dashes, dots, squiggles. Let's have a look. Yeah, some of the later Kandinskys. This is one from 1921, where everything's a little bit more stylized. But you get all of these different kind of shapes, and quite often when you're looking at a Kandinsky, you can imagine that maybe certain shapes represent certain sounds. So these little scattered dots over here are almost like the pitter-patter or thumping sound of some kind of percussion instrument, maybe. Whereas a sound like this or a shape like this is much more like, to me, a great kind of slice of sound from a string instrument or something like that kind of maybe starts very loud, then gets quieter as it goes along. You also see lines in Kandinsky like this, which are suggestive of rhythms. Okay, so those of you that are musicians who are used to playing a particular rhythm or a particular beat on a percussion instrument, you can sort of see that idea represented visually in a lot of what Kandinsky does. So yeah, incredibly influential, incredibly imaginative artist, and he's going to be our inspiration for today. As I say, some of you may have heard of him before, but you won't perhaps have tried the activity that we're going to do today, which is inspired by Kandinsky, but I said at the beginning that it was all about listening, and we are going to be listening to a particular piece of music today, and there's a link to that particular piece of music on Show My Homework, and we're going to be thinking how that piece of music translates or could translate into something visual, thinking about Kandinsky's ideas as well. You're going to need your sketchbook, you're going to need your paints again, you're also going to need your coloured pencils, your crayons. So while I'm just getting these out and sharpening them, let's have a little listen to the piece of music that we are going to be responding to today. The piece of music we've just heard a little section of there is by a composer called Steve Reich, who is an American composer. That's a piece of music called Music for 18 Musicians. And it was that particular performance is from 1978, so much later than Kandinsky. One of the things about Steve Reich's music, which is so interesting, I think, is that it features lots and lots of repetitive sounds, which build up in layers over time. And so you end up with these amazing kind of soundscapes that to me sound like the busy activity of modern life, you know, the kind of the typing of keys on a keyboard, the kind of rhythm of cars zooming up and down the road, the kind of daily routine of waking up, you know, brushing your teeth, making your breakfast and repeating the same day after day. And these are the things that Steve Reich's music reminds me of. What we're going to do today is we're going to make a little response to Music for 18 Musicians, and we're going to do it like this. In that piece of music, you have, as the title suggests, 18 musicians playing 18 instruments. Sometimes it's the human voice, sometimes it's a piano, sometimes it's wind instruments or what have you. But you've got 18 different things making sound. And so what we're going to do is we're going to try and make an abstract painting on the next page in our sketchbook, which is made up of 18 different marks, okay, 18 different visual marks. And it's going to be abstract, so it's going to be a little bit like Kandinsky in the sense that it's not going to be a picture of anything that we recognise, it's just going to be abstract. And we're going to kind of sort of improvise it and make it up as we go along. So you're going to put Steve Reich on in the background, so you're going to have music for 18 musicians playing. Okay, you can play it nice and quietly if you want in the background, or you can play it nice and loud, but maybe with your headphones on, it's up to you. And we're going to play that piece of music and make a piece of work in response. And here's how we're going to start. I'm going to choose, first of all, what my first mark is going to be. And I think my first mark that I'm going to try and use is going to be a painted mark, and I'm going to choose some of this nice bright orange colour over here. Okay, now your marks can be anything at all: dots, dashes, loops, squiggles, circles, whatever. I'm going to start with something really simple. I'm going to start with a little kind of like flick curved shape like that. Okay, a little bit more water. So that's going to be my first mark. And I'm going to start off just by repeating that mark over and over again, just like we have those repeated sounds in Music for 18 Musicians. So I'm just going to repeat this. One of the things you notice in Music for 18 Musicians is that over time, sounds start to fade and kind of disappear into the background. So I quite like the fact that as I repeat this over and over, that may start to happen. Okay, so that's my first mark. Notice how I did that little mark over there, so I can tell I've done one thing so far, and then I've used it over and over again over here. My next mark, I'm going to contrast that. I think I'm going to make my next mark with a pencil. Oops. And my next mark is going to be, I think I'm just going to have a little kind of flick, a little line that goes in that direction. And so here is my next mark. Now I did mention, and you will notice this as you listen to the Steve Reich piece, that the sounds overlap, you get them in layers. Okay, so it's not just you don't just hear one thing at a time, you hear lots of things at the same time throughout the piece of music. So with my little dash mark here, I'm going to pick a point where I'm going to start. Okay, this is where it's going to come in here. And I'm going to repeat that over and over again, like this, going through my piece of work in the background. It's quite interesting, this. It's starting to look like a raining cloud of some kind. It's quite interesting. You sometimes get that in Kandinsky's abstract things as well. You know, even though he's painting something completely abstract, when you look at it for a while, you might be able to see a storm or, you know, sometimes a landscape even kind of hidden or starting to emerge out of it. But we're not going to have that consciously in our minds as we're going. Okay, so next mark. So this time I'm going to go back to my paint. And this time I think I'm going to have a little kind of smaller kind of C shape like that. And this is going to start here and go over the top. It's interesting this, it reminds me a little bit of handwriting practice when I was at primary school. It's quite hard to remember that far back now, but it's a memory that's very strong for me, actually, being able to remember that repetitive practice over and over and over again. Okay. So I've got 3 marks so far, and what I'm asking you to do today is to go through this process until you've got 18 different marks down the side here, and you've used them over and over again in this way to build up your abstract representation of this piece of music. Okay. All the time you might try and think, what's going to look good next with this? I mean, I'm going to use a little yellow kind of scribbly shape like that, and I'm actually going to start up at the top here this time, work my way back across like this. These conflicting shapes and things, and you'll get these beautiful little areas where stuff starts to just overlap. And you get something quite exciting happening as the colour overlaps one thing on top of another. I really do suggest that you kind of listen to the music over and over. The music won't be everybody's cup of tea, okay? Some of you may find it really repetitive, really annoying, and so you don't necessarily have to listen to it all the way through, but I kind of suggest that you do, actually. I think the piece of work that you make will be much more sort of authentic and real if you can manage to listen to the music all the way through as you're doing it. So I'm going to carry on with this, and maybe we'll do a little kind of sort of speeded up time-lapsey kind of version of me so that you can see how mine turns out. But yeah, this is the brief for today, and we'll come back at the end and see how mine has gone. Alright, so look, I'm just going to pause it there just to talk about where I've got so far rather than going on through my whole 18 marks. So far I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 marks there, which is pretty cool actually, almost there. Something that I just noticed as I was doing that, which is another really important point for you just to think about, and it's to do with the relationship between your drawing and the music that you're listening to. When you listen to the music, you'll notice that sometimes things get louder or quieter. Sometimes the sounds seem to kind of mutate and kind of just morph slightly and very, very subtly over time. So just as I was doing that blue pencil crayon mark there, I noticed that at times as my pencil got slightly blunter, or I changed it slightly so that the mark became slightly different, that mark, although my movement of my hand was kind of essentially the same, the mark started to change a little bit as I was drawing. Try and notice those things as you go along, and just see and notice how the whole thing starts to mutate, alter and morph as you go through the piece. Interesting also how I turned my book around halfway through that, and that was just to stop me kind of repeating the same thing too much in the same direction. So if you turn your book around, you may even want to turn it this way sometimes and kind of work across like this. Completely up to you really. I'm expecting everybody to come up with an individual response to this, which is in line with your own interpretation of the brief. Okay, so today's job, or today's activity, an abstract drawing / painting, listening to music, so inspired on one hand by the thoughts and the ideas of Vasily Kandinsky, but also crucially inspired by the rhythms and repetitions of Music for 18 Musicians by Steve Reich. Good luck, have fun, and we'll see you after half term.